morning. Please be seated. Abundance. That word seems to be, well, abundantly. We'll see it twice in our current missal right there in front of you in the pew. We'll hear it a few times a day. The priest will say it during the Great Thanksgiving, and we'll say it together during the post-communion prayer. There's a political book by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson called Abundance. Google Trends reports that interest in the word abundance has doubled since 2016. It is abundant. The word abundance usually has a positive spin to it. If I say I have an abundant amount of Oreo cookies, you know that not only do I have enough Oreo cookies for me to eat, but I have more than enough, a copious number of Oreos. Heck, I'd be willing to share my Oreos with gladness, as I have so many Oreos. My joy will be increased as I see you enjoying the Oreos as well. Compare that with saying that I have an abundant number of empty plastic Oreo packages. We wouldn't use the word abundance that way. If someone told me they had an abundance of bills to pay, I would probably say that was sarcasm. So when we say the phrase God of abundance or abundant life, we assume a positive spin. For most of us, and for probably all of human history, that spin is equated to the accumulation of stuff. In many Christian circles, abundance, as the accumulation of stuff, is a sign from God of God's favor. If you look for it, you can see this theme repeated throughout the Bible. God rewards the righteous with stuff and does dirty the sinner. We heard this idea a bit from Paul last week with his, we know that all things work together for good for those who love God. There's an entire theological approach, often called prosperity gospel, where the faith leader must display conspicuous consumption to demonstrate their tightness with God. The more stuff they have, the more God loves them. Jacob thought that God's abundance was the accumulation of stuff. He also thought it was his duty to God to do what he needed to do to get that stuff. Jacob, which means he who grasps the hill, or Supplanter, was born trying to get more. Later, Jacob wheels and deals to get more of his brother Esau's inheritance. Jacob wheels and deals to get Rachel. Jacob wheels and deals to get material wealth at his uncle Laban's expense. Jacob wheels and deals to set out to get his own territory. Think of Jacob as Hebrew Scripture's Jeff Bezos. Jacob's wealth is a sign of God's favor. Where we find Jacob in today's reading is that he is angry and confused. Jacob believes that he and all his household are about to be slaughtered by his brother. Jacob's scouts are told that Esau is coming with 400 men. Numbers in the Bible can mean more than just the number. 400 men suggest it's a fighting force. Trying to save his own life, Jacob tries wheeling and dealing by dividing his wealth, sending bribes, offering free prime for 30 days, and as we hear today, separating himself from his wife and children so maybe Esau won't kill them all. Having sent everyone away, Jacob is now alone. What has all his wheeling and dealing gotten him? All the stuff that he has strived for is about to be put to the sword. What he needs is a bigger fighting force than Esau. He doesn't have enough. In that long, dark night, Jacob wrestles. Was it an ordinary man, an angel, God in hidden form? The text isn't clear. I think the man was the image of God inside of Jacob, his conscience, his soul, the core of his being. Faced with annihilation on the morrow, Jacob is trying to reconcile God's covenant with Abraham and Sarah, God's promise to himself at Bethel, and his current situation. Wasn't Jacob's wheeling and dealing, his work at accumulating stuff, wasn't that all about becoming a great people in a promised land? Hadn't God given Jacob all this as a sign of God's favor? Why was this all going to end in just a few hours? Where is God's promise now? What had Jacob done wrong? Why is God doing this to him? Where is God's love? And through the night, Jacob wrestles with God. The world is not making sense. Jacob must figure this out. Near dawn, Jacob has a shift of insight so intense that his hip gets blown out. Jacob realizes that his wealth obtained by wheeling and dealing is not God's promise, that his good fortune is not a sign of God's favor. Jacob discovers that it is this wrestling, this focused, intense relationship with God, that is what gives life. God's promise is to be in relationship with Jacob through the core of Jacob's being. Jacob striving with God, his working with God, his living with God in his very soul. That is where he has abundance. Jacob desires God to bless this new understanding, to confirm that living with God is the path to the fullness of life. By morning, Jacob becomes Israel, which means one who strives with God. Soon, Israel will go to Esau with the limp of a disabled person, an outcast, one whom many believe God has cursed. Society will judge that God has withheld his favor. Israel, however, knows that he's striving with God. That is enough. Spoiler alert, when Israel meets Esau, Esau doesn't kill him. God's abundance as having more than enough stuff is not what the Jacob-Israel transformation story is telling us. I think it's also not what today's gospel is telling us either. I think they're both telling us that God's abundance is living into the full relationship God desires to have with you. Abundance is about striving with God. Not against God, with God. The Matthew feeding of the 5,000 plus all the rest of the humanity there, story can be read as God giving people stuff as a sign of God's favor. In this case, food. I think we like to hear it because, well, we need food. But what our soul, our core being needs is to be in relationship with God. I think Matthew is addressing our spiritual hunger here far more than our physical hunger. Matthew starts the story with Jesus having compassion on the crowd, not just because some of them are sick and all of them hungry, but because they are striving for their core being, their soul, to be recognized as worthy and valued. They are striving for justice. They are striving for community. They are striving for peace. They are striving for life. The crowd is striving against the powers and principalities that tell them they are fodder to be used. They strive against a K-shaped economy where the few rich get richer and the vast majority get poorer. They strive against propagandists who sow fear that some other will keep them from having enough. And they strive against the conspiracy mongers who pit one oppressed part of creation against another oppressed part. Some in the crowd may even commit horrible acts of violence to try to prove that they matter. Jesus calls to his disciples, the ones who follow him, that study under him, that adopt his way of love. Jesus tells them to feed the crowd, to address their striving. We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, that may well be what was in the shopping cart. Again, numbers can have symbolic meaning in the Bible. The first century Jews, that seemed to be Matthew's target audience, could easily jump to something like, "We have nothing here but the law, the prophets, and the writings," or some variation close to that. What those Jews who were part of the way of Jesus would have heard is all that the disciples had to address the crowd striving, the story of God's relationship with Israel. Matthew has Jesus take the story of God's covenant, bless it, and break it. Again, that first century member of the way would hear overtones of the Last Supper and the Eucharist. Just as the man blessed Jacob and gave him a new name, Jesus blesses the story of striving with God and unites it into his sacrificial way of love. This is no run-of-the-mill miracle. Matthew is proclaiming that in Jesus, the story of Israel is about to accumulate in the arrival of the kingdom of heaven, that God is in all, over all, and with all of creation. Jesus has the disciples go to the striving people of God who are sitting in the grass. The disciples are to announce that God is with the striving people. God is with those striving for justice. God is with those striving for community. God is with those striving for peace. The followers of Jesus are to share the renewed story of Israel, that the kingdom of heaven is upon us. We are to witness with our lives that the way of Jesus, the way of love, of joining with God to create wild, diverse, and honored creation, that being in relationship with the triune God is what gives life. Matthew is telling us that the striving, that the two chocolate wafers of God and God's image, united by the sweet creme of agape love, that this is a feast that is enough for our core being. Even the cookie crumbs of a community living an Oreo life fills baskets enough for all of God's people. In fact, living a life of love, of striving with God to bring the kingdom of heaven into our core being and into the world, is more than enough for our soul. It is abundance.
It is the support of people like you that enables the various ministries of Episcopal Church of the Redeemer in Kenmore, Washington. Join us in person, in prayer, and in giving financially. To give financially one time, scan this QR code. All are welcome to participate fully at Church of the Redeemer. All races, all religions, all countries of origin, all sexual orientations, including LGBTQ+, and all genders. Church of the Redeemer, worshiping God, living in community, and reaching out to the world. We are an Episcopal church serving North King County and South Snohomish County, Washington. As you travel your road, go with friends walking the way of Jesus at Redeemer. The Episcopal Church welcomes you.